Of the Prince Edward Island Electoral Boundaries Commission. We're happy to be here in Montague in this lovely situation. Beautiful room. My name is Gerard Mitchell and I'm the chair of the commission. The other members of the commission are Lynn Murray on my immediate right. On my far right is Libby Shaw. On my immediate left, Kerry Carpenter, and on my far left, Elmer MacDonald. I want to thank you for coming out tonight, and the Commission looks forward to hearing your submissions. I'm just going to make a few brief remarks. I hope to take no more than about 10 minutes. Then I'll invite you to come forward to make your submissions or presentations or ask questions. As you may know, the Commission is presently engaged in the drawing of an 18-district electoral map of Prince Edward Island. I hasten to add that the 18-district map that we are drawing now will not be the electoral map for the next provincial general election. The map for that will be the 27-district map the Commission drew last year and that was adopted by the legislature in May of 2017. The task of drawing the 18-district map has its origin in the decision of the government to hold a referendum on electoral reform in conjunction with the next provincial general election. On December the 20th, 2017, the Premier sent me a letter as chair, which was tabled in the House of the Assembly the same day. In that letter, he said, and I quote, "In the speech from the throne, the government committed to the creation of an independent map that lays out the 18 geographic boundaries inherent in the mixed-member proportional model put forward in the 2016 plebiscite. To that end, we would formally request that the Electoral Boundaries Commission undertake this advisory work. This will ensure a level of public education essential on a matter of such fundamental importance in our democratic process," end quote. In short, then, the Commission is to produce an independently drawn 18-district electoral map of the province to be used as an educational tool during the upcoming referendum process. The mixed-member proportional model put forward in 2016 contemplates a 27-member legislature composed of 18 district MLAs and 9 MLAs at large. This Commission's job is to come up with a map dividing the island into the 18 electoral districts so that people will be able to see what that would look like. In drawing this 18-district map, the Commission will be following the same principles and procedures as it did in creating the 27-district map last year. In other words, we are drawing this 18-district map as if it were going to be the official electoral map for the next election. That, we feel, is the best way to make sure it is a good educational tool for the referendum. The purpose of this meeting is for the Commission to receive public input about where the various boundaries should or should not be located on that 18-district map. To stimulate the discussion, the Commission has prepared and brought with it 2 sample maps, which are on the wall outside and can be shown on the screen behind me. The Commission is not committed to either of those maps. It may well be that in the end of the process, neither of these maps will be the one that the Commission finally settles upon. Last year, when we were drawing the 27-district map, we took 2 sample maps to our public meetings, but in the end, neither of those maps were the one that were adopted by the Commission. When it draws an electoral map, the Commission is constrained in what it can do by Section 3 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which provides that every citizen has the right to vote. The leading authority on the right to vote in the context of fixing electoral boundaries is the decision of the Supreme Court of Canada in the 1991 Carter case out of Saskatchewan. In that case, the Supreme Court of Canada held that the right to vote in Section 3 of the Charter includes the right of every citizen to have effective representation in the Legislative Assembly of the province. The Supreme Court of Canada goes on to say that the first condition for effective representation is the relative parity of voting power. That is to say, one person's vote should not be diluted compared to another's. Although parity is the primary condition of effective representation, it is not the only factor worthy of consideration. Drawing electoral boundaries is not just a mathematical exercise. Section 3 of the Charter mandates effective representation, not equality of voting power. The Supreme Court of Canada also recognized in the Carter case that although a citizen's vote should not be unduly diluted, effective representation often cannot be achieved without taking into account countervailing factors such as geography, regional issues, community history, community interests, municipal boundaries, minority representation, and population trends. These factors can sometimes justify some deviation from equality of voting power. In Prince Edward Island, electoral districts are based on the number of registered voters. According to the records of Elections PEI, this province has about 100,000 registered voters. Based on 18 parity districts, that would mean a provincial average of 5,500 voters per district. The reason we are here is to get your help in identifying any countervailing factors that have such a bearing on effective representation in this area of the province as to justify some deviation from parity. That is to say, some deviation from the 5,500 number. The Commission has with us here this evening to help out Mr. Paul Allen, the Director of Communications for Elections PEI, and Mr. Terry Scott, our mapping technician. Paul can help you with the maps, and Terry can move boundaries around on the screen to show you what changes would you suggest would look like if they were given effect and how they would affect the numbers. I want to thank you for listening to my opening remarks, and now I invite anyone who wishes to come forward to make a submission or presentation or simply to ask a question. The meeting is being recorded, so I would ask that you please state your name when you come to the microphone. And we're ready to hear from anyone who would like to start off.
Hello, Justice Mitchell. I'm Alan McPhee from Surrey. Just one quick two questions. I'm curious, of course, Region 16 in both maps has a huge variance of underpopulation. What's in that region that gives it special status? Why was that chosen?
That is the Acadian area of the province, and it has traditionally been small district. It's a small district in the 27 map too, and it's, as I say, it's traditional and considered necessary in order to give effective representation for the Acadian population, not only there but throughout the province. As you know, there are different pockets of Acadian across the island, from all the way from Tignish to Surrey, and we're told that the member from that area usually is considered a spokesperson for Acadians wherever they live on the province. So that one has always had a sort of special status.
I think that's great. And I would support, if you're taking comments, I would support
Sure,
that
yep.
initiative. I think that's a great initiative. Any such consideration given to the Mi'kmaq?
There's no consideration in this or any of the maps or special consideration for the Aboriginal community. On the other hand, they've never made any request or presentation for that either.
And would you be open? Would that be within your mandate?
I don't think it's within our mandate present time.
Okay. My last question. And I think
I might say on that, if I just to answer you a little more fully, a few years ago in Nova Scotia, the Aboriginal community was asked if they would like to have a non-contiguous district created, made up of various reserves, and they declined. They preferred the way they were, that they were spread out among different districts, because they felt that gave them more representation. If they went into one district, they felt that might pigeonhole them too much.
Sure, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. Often, well, not often, us rural people are always making the point that, yes, there's a population trend and has been towards the city, but it's our position that in rural PEI, government knows where we are for taxes, but not for spending. And, all the data shows that the government investment in jobs is not here, the government investment in grants is not here, that we're a net provider, a net subsidizer of the government. And I know it's been recognized, and I think Cape Breton actually had a court case in Nova Scotia about it that they lost, the municipality of Cape Breton, but they call the body of government, all the workers and the civil service, effective government. It's another style of government, and it's recognized that the effective government has a representation to the community in which it resides, i.e. the people who work in government in Charlottetown and live there have a vested interest in their own community. So, and I know that always comes up, and I see in your second map that there's some consideration given to that. My question is, with the Supreme Court ruling that you cited earlier, was there any particular reference or latitude in that decision specifically regarding effective government?
Well, there was, in the sense that it was recognized that, for example, that rural districts are more difficult to represent, and that was recognized by this commission too in our 27 district map, where we made districts in closer to the capital and in the big municipal areas a little larger than they would otherwise be, and the ones in the rural a little smaller than they would otherwise be. But of course, we're dealing with Prince Edward Island, which is small and densely populated. It's hard to make too much of the difference.
Yeah, I understand in Manitoba that there are a lot of variants of up to 25%.
Well, there are, but there are a lot of the western provinces in particular have some very sparsely inhabited sections, and in those sections there are big variances. But like take Saskatchewan, for instance. In southern Saskatchewan, it's only 5% variance that's allowed. Whereas up northern Saskatchewan, where it's sparse, they're up to 25%, I think.
And the reason for it looks to be about a 10% variance on map 2. Was that just a number that you felt was fair, or was there any particular guidance for that number?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part of what you said.
On the second map, on sample 2,
Yes?
it appears, the population goes from 96% to 108%, approximately a 10% variance between the urban and the rural districts. Was there any guidance on using 10% versus 20%, or that just seemed to be the most reasonable number to you?
Just a number. We wanted to come with a couple of maps. The problem if we just come with one map, people will say, "Well, you've already made up your mind, so why are we here?" So we wanted to show that we haven't made up our minds yet. So we came with a couple of maps.
So but was there any reason for 10% variance versus 15% variance?
Well, yeah, there's because if you look at the 27 map, we are only able to justify around 10% in variance. So we're still dealing with the same province, still have the same problem. Although, in our legislation under 17.2, I think it is, of the Electoral Boundaries Act, it says no variation can be more than 25% above or below. So the legislature contemplates a variance that might be that high. Problem is that the Supreme Court of Canada has said the first condition of effective representation is parity. Yes, you can move away from parity, but you can only move as far as is necessary for effective representation. You just can't go where you like. So just because 17.2 says 25% doesn't mean we can go all the way to 25%, because it's the charter that governs. So,
Thank you.
okay.
Any other comments?
Cletus, I know, likes his 25%. I don't want to hear from him.
64% for District 16.
Pardon me?
It's 64% for District 16.
Yes.
A little bit over the variance.
Yeah. Well, it's a little over the 25.
Just a question. Is
Here,
that,
use the mic.
no.
Yeah, but we can't record you if you
We
don't
have
use
to
the
have-
mic.
Oh, don't.
Yeah. And state your name.
Sorry, yes. Yes, it's Pat Updegrove, Victoria Cross. So the purpose of the meeting essentially is to familiarize ourselves, for you to help us with the process. And secondly, to identify in our own area anything that we may want considered in terms of.
Yeah, yes,
Correct?
that's right. We're about drawing boundaries. We have put boundaries on both maps. You might say that there should be somewhere else. Move them this way, that way, or
Right.
you may have a better,
So I'm just asking, could we have a closer look then?
Pardon me?
Could we have a closer look? I mean, he's at the map now,
Yeah.
and if we could kind of zoom around here a little.
You want to do the Montague, around Montague, is that what you're?
Well, I think it depends on others as well and what they would like to see, but I know I'd like to see Montague and how it flows into the other areas, for me anyway. But get that back to us. So concerned with geographical, as well as maybe some road areas.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in terms of topographical as well.
Municipal boundaries, that sort of thing.
Was there any consideration given to the new municipality? Oh, sorry, I didn't expect to keep talking.
You're talking about the
Yes, the Three Rivers Initiative,
amalgamation.
yes.
Yes, that's something we would consider.
Has it been considered in terms of these maps, or is it to be considered?
Well, we're prepared to hear
I see.
what they have to say on that.
Because it does include these areas. and down Valleyfield. Yes, we see, of course, the separation that would take place here between the municipality areas, which would be on the right, and the municipality areas on the left, which would be typically, I think, incorporated. Could we go up a little bit to New Perth and a little beyond? I thought I saw Cardigan in terms of their ahead of Cardigan. Could we go up that far? There we are. All right. In Georgetown, okay. So I'm seeing 3 areas then for the, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone else who's in that committee or steering committee, but or familiar with it, but I see 3 areas. The municipality, if it were to take place, would be in 3 separate areas.
These are the municipal boundaries, these yellow
Yes.
boundaries, so zoom out a bit.
I mean, in the new one, so when you go south, it also includes Lower Montague, Valleyfield, et cetera, so the new one, if it were to take place.
Doesn't take those, does it? What? Doesn't take
So
those.
I think that's probably my only
it doesn't.
point, is how this map is represented in terms of the proposed new municipality.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
My name is Dennis Halliday, and I live in Belfast, so part of the current District 4. And just by looking at this map, I guess I'm going to state the obvious, which everyone's probably aware of, that these proposals would be quite a significant change into what we have now for us in District 4, because we go now to Murray River and Murray Harbor down that way, and now we're going all the way over to Victoria Cross and way beyond that. So it certainly is a significant change for the residents of our district. We're going to lose a lot that are now in the district, and we're going to gain a bunch of people. And it's and you've already stated this about for the MLA, it's a significant area to cover. So that's one point I want to make. In relation to District 16, I respect my Acadian friends, but I think that my vote should count just as much as theirs. And I know you have the charter to deal with and all that stuff, but I think it's if we're all equal, we should all be equal. And I think of, you know, you stated earlier that the MLA for that area represents the Acadians, but we have Acadians in Charlottetown. There's tons of people who are Acadian origin, and so they're getting to vote there, and then they're having somebody that supposedly represents them. To me, that's a little bit of a double standard. Again, with all due respect to them, but all right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's Alan McPhee again. The last gentleman just sparked a comment in my head. I remember back in, I think it was 92, when this went from dual riding to single riding map, and the judicial ruling at that time spoke about eliminating the county lines because there was no defined, quote, community of interest. And it occurs to me that community of interest is a key concept here. And when I look at what you've drawn for the map for District 1, and I find this, by the way, this map that shows equal distribution of population in Sample 1 very interesting and very useful. I don't think it's appropriate for election purposes, but it's an interesting view. So I'm just going to look at map Sample 2, and I think on the northern boundary where you have the cutoff closer to Magell is more appropriate than Morel, because Morel is not a, if we talk about a natural community of interest in District 1, you could go St. Peter's as far as Morel or Magell, but beyond that, it's just, it goes west. And I think same on the southern border. In both maps, the line is drawn to Cardigan Bridge, and which would include all of that launching area, and that community naturally gravitates towards Montague. So if natural community of interest is of relevance in terms of, you know, the legal definition from that sparked this thing back in 25 years ago, I would say that the boundary would be more closer to Dundas on the south, or Bridgetown and on the south, and Magell St. Peter's on the north.
When we drew the last map, tried to pay a lot of attention to the idea because it was stressed so much of community of interest. Of course, when you get bigger ridings, that becomes more difficult. And of course, when we're dealing with 18 instead of 27, well, we're cutting the ridings by a third, and the population of each riding then becomes half as large again as under the 27. So it becomes more difficult sometimes to observe the community of interest aspect. But I appreciate what you're saying.
Any other comments tonight?
Hi, Alan Roach, currently of no fixed address. I find it interesting, and when you drew the last maps for the election that's coming up in 2019, and I guess it goes back to a little bit of what Pat said over here. I think that, for example, Victoria Cross is just a few feet down the road, kind of from Montague, and it seems like that's a natural fit for the town of Montague. And yet, in both of the maps that you brought forward, we go as far away as Beach Point, and yet we have a community that's only a couple of feet down the road, which really most people consider to be part of Montague anyway. So I see that as a bit challenging, and I would ask you if you could just kind of take that into consideration.
Okay.
That's one that seems to leap out at me, because when you drew the last map, a lot of the feedback that I got anyway was, you know, that's a great map. You finally have Victoria Cross where it should be, so to speak. So, and I guess
think we heard a lot about Victoria
Yeah.
Cross the last time around. So.
Sure, and that's subject, I guess, to everybody's kind of thoughts on it. But certainly, one thing I want to do is thank you for this work. This is not an easy task by any means. It never is anytime you go out and you start talking about electoral boundaries. But and again, I think when we look at communities that are kind of gravitate towards one area, it'd be a shame to see something happen where that is considered one area and then you split it on an electoral map somehow. So, but when you look at this is a really a big challenge. So I thank you for the effort on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further comments?
Thanks, Leo Shivery, and I'm from Kings County originally. I want to appreciate the maps that have been given, but I think, and I don't know, and I apologize because we're a little bit late in terms of knowing what kind of discussion happened before this, but I think it's important, you know, that in terms of looking at the boundaries of the 18 districts or splakes, we know they'll be larger than the 27 districts right now, but I think we need to have more of a discussion around what that means in terms of the 9 other non-district based seats in terms of that are needed for proportionality in the model. So I think we need to figure out that as well as local representation, you get more accurate representation overall in terms of reflecting what the electorate as a whole wants. And I wanted you to think differently in terms of just a geographic map, that a map of list representatives isn't like a traditional district map, but the list goes beyond the geography because it can deal with the fact is that if we need greater things to deal with, whether that be gender or diversity or a wider diversity of the electorate's hopes and dreams, then having those 9 seats need to be looked at as well in terms of providing that broader context. And it can be done in a way that helps respect, for example, whichever party may develop lists or where they're based, could also be done in a geographic format so that people that in one district may have access to more than one MLA in terms of representing their interests. And also it kind of reflects what they're in, what in actual fact the electorate wants. So I think as well as geographical and regional representations, we can look at, for example, a party that the list or whatever they develop, if it's more geographically representative or it's greater based on greater gender parity or a greater diversity of underrepresented groups, then actually that in fact is part of being representative of the island as a whole. And it necessarily means that in actual fact we have people that are in the legislature that reflect the diversity of the island as a whole. And so in addition to a traditional elected MLA, we'd have other people that are also there representing the interests of the people that vote. And I think that's a really significant issue. And I'm not sure if the maps we have here reflect that, and maybe there has to be some greater detail to actually explain that to people, for people to understand. Because I think just producing a geographic map, you need to actually show the other aspects of what that would mean, and a single map just doesn't do that. But I also want to say as well, in terms of the Acadian representation, it is focused on one part of the island, and there are Acadians in other parts of the island as well, and I agree. But I know in other cases that have happened in other provinces that's a really important thing in terms of making sure that that voice is represented in the legislature. And as someone who's of Acadian descent, I think it's really important that we ensure that that voice is also maintained. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shivery. I appreciate your comments. However, I've got to explain to people that our certificate isn't high enough to deal with all that you are talking about. We're just to draw the geographical map of the 18 districts. So the other part of it, the pros and cons, we'll leave that to a later day when others will speak to that, I presume, at an appropriate time.
Thank you. I'm Alan Parker from Mill River East.
From where, sir?
Mill River East.
Okay, thank you.
We had to come to Montague because we
Mill
couldn't get a
River
room.
East,
We
far,
couldn't get a room in
far.
Charlottetown. So. Just wondering, when you have the meeting in West Prince, will we be able to have the existing map superimposed over any of the?
You mean when you
27?
say the 27? Well, we could have done that. We didn't do that because we don't want to have this as kind of a contest between maps. We're just here to draw a map of 18 districts, so we don't want to be seen to be getting into the debate as to which electoral system is going to be the best. So that's why we don't have a map of the 27. That was deliberate on our part.
Right. So when you come to West Prince, no.
But we could. Pardon me?
He could click it right now.
Can you click it now? Got it?
Turn the county lines off. District 1, District 2, District 7.
3, 4.
So what we're looking at here then is the most recent map of the 27, is that correct?
Yes.
I don't have a particular comment.
Okay, you
to
just
ad-
wanted to
to
see if we
address
could,
that. Just wanted to see if we get
Yeah,
everyone
yeah.
equally confused.
okay.
And I,
Well, do the people here feel that it would be a good idea to have that map on the wall along with the others? You know, we have the two sample maps outside. When we go to a meeting in up west or anywhere else, you want to have the present 27 district meeting as well?
Be a good idea, wouldn't it, since most people don't know it. My
Okay.
name's Darcy Launch, and I live in Mermaid, and I wouldn't mind looking at Mermaid, actually, if you go, because Mermaid is split right down that middle with the map that you just drew, and this one seems to even split it again. Just a little further up there. Mermaid in its entirety down to Mount Herbert was in Mermaid Morel, Mermaid, I always say that the other way, Sydney. But for the 27, you split it like right in the middle of the community. And now you've split it again in a different place, actually even more towards the center, and have Mermaid, half of it in with Wood Islands and the other half of it in with whatever. And, you know, I live in Mermaid. I ride my bicycle to work in Charlottetown, so I'm not really sure what I have in common with Wood Islands or even Morel for that matter. But it's basically a suburb.
But I don't think it's Essex. Oh, is this the Wood
Seemed kind of a step in the right direction to put it in with Stratford,
Yeah.
but all of it would have been better than half of it.
Thank you.
Any further comments?
We don't.
Thanks, Paul. Sydney McEwen, I'm the MLA for Morel Mermaid, or Mermaid Morel, depending on who's asking. I'll leave the split community of Morel probably, that'll come up maybe when you do meet in Morel as well. I'm curious about, and as Alan said, I appreciate the work you're doing, because this is not easy, because there's 100 split communities there, every line, especially when you get into trying to keep it around 5,500. But as far as school zones, how much consideration into your initial maps did school zones play? I know that's one thing I heard a lot when the 27 districts were coming with the map is, you know, are we going to try and keep most of our school zone in a political district? It seemed to work well. Was that much of a consideration, or are the districts just too big to even try and consider that?
Well, I think we certainly will try to consider it, but the size is a problem. I thought we did pretty well in the 27 district map, but it gets harder. There's no question. But it's certainly something that we try to do, but it's not possible to do all of those sort of community of interest things that we did in the 27 map in an 18 district map.
Is there any one layer that you were able to kind of lean on with this one? Like, is it closer to fire districts? Is it closer to school zones? Or was it just, you know, put them on there and then kind of, you know, play around with it? But was there anything when you get? I guess my question is, when you get to this size, is there any kind of a layer that you can kind of lean on to say, okay, that seems to be around 5,500?
We try to go by municipal boundaries a lot. That's a factor that we try to keep into account. And we would try to keep school districts too, but like I say, it ain't easy.
No, and I get that, right? Like, I can go up there and say, oh, look, you split Morel right down the middle, but Alan just talked about you split Montague kind of down the middle,
Yeah.
Victoria Cross. So which community do you leave in, leave out, and
Yeah.
and split? And especially because you run into a bit of a population when you've got,
Right.
not that we're calling that too
Yeah.
urban, but you do have a bit of a small population. So I expect that'll be probably a number one issue that keeps coming up, probably is the municipalities, and job one, of course, I think is to keep those municipalities intact. But just as a comment, I'm all for keeping those school zones intact as well. I think that's important in the future to. Thanks.
Thank you.
Two questions. I'm sorry, Pat Updegrove again. Yes, I have to repeat that, don't I? Is there any latitude in the number? Does it have to be 18?
Pardon me?
Is there any latitude in the number? Does it have to be 18? It has to absolutely.
Oh, it has to be 18,
18,
yeah. There's
okay.
no latitude.
And could you review again once again, please, sorry, for the timeline? So the timeline we're going through with your commission to all the way to decision making? You did talk a little bit about it at the beginning, but I think there are many people here who weren't here when you did your talk.
Well, I was just saying that in December we had been asked to draw this 18 district map showing the geographical boundaries of the
Going forward.
Going forward, but that is not going to be the map for this next general election.
We understand.
Yeah.
And now past that.
Past that?
Yes. What's the timeline past that? So when do you expect a decision to be made?
When we'll
Yes.
have our map done?
Yes.
Oh, I think we'd hope to have it done in March, early March.
Of this year?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further comments?
If I can, Darcy Launchite, Mermaid, if I can just continue on your question, Pat. So when you redid the 27, what was your timeline for that?
It was about the same. I think we started in January and we finished in May.
Okay. It was delayed 6 months and then 6 months again, and then you started in January, and it was a 5-month project.
No,
Oh, yes, it was mandatory. It was a mandatory redrawing. It's in the legislature, and
Yeah.
then it was pushed
but
back
the commission
6
was
months.
only appointed
and then 6 months.
commission was only appointed, I think, in December. When
December.
everybody was finally named, and then we started meeting as a commission in January, and public meetings were in February.
Okay,
It started in February.
same thing, and then the final result was May.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
And we had a lot more public meetings. For the 27 seat map, I think we probably met 14 times. So we're going out, I think, 5 times this time.
Anything further? Don't want to leave Montague this early in the evening.
Well, I think perhaps the last time there were not very many in attendance. So we had one meeting that we had one at, and a couple more where we had 2 or 3. This would have been a big audience last time around. Very big audience.
Although that said, we did learn something at every one of those meetings, but we also can use what we learned during those meetings for this. That's another reason why we don't feel we need as many meetings. Yes, sir.
John Rowe, a resident of, I think it's the Union Road, but it may be part of Victoria Cross. Nevertheless, I think you've aptly demonstrated that it's a lot of fun to draw when you have Prince Edward Island and you're trying to put numbers together, because when you look at the first map on page 1, you look at very little variance. If you go 101, 102, 100.8, and that's obviously not going to allow for for any of the things that we talked about here in terms of following municipal boundaries or following school board borders or anything of that particular nature. If you start in the most densely populated areas, as in the urban area of Charlottetown, and then you go out to the extremities, then this is the kind of issue that you're going to have to deal with anyway. So no matter, we can't predict what's going to happen down the road, and this is a contingency measure anyway, is that correct? This is not a fait accompli, as in the sense that we're going to have 18 with 9 ex officio members, etc. So it's more or less tossing out there what could happen if indeed the populace of PEI should decide that that should happen.
That's correct. That's correct.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen Myers.
Hi, Steve.
Sorry for being late. I thought it started at 7,
problem.
but I really just came to see the map. But I'm just thinking from sheerly an MLA perspective here. I know that's not the nature of the process and what you're trying to accomplish, but if you look at the current district that I represent, it would have the Georgetown Peninsula in it, and it would kind of go straight across from Howe Bay over to Monticello. And so this map, without the Georgetown Peninsula, a little bit further towards Morel by the look of it, and then all of District 1. I guess the question is, what were your variances starting out? Because the district that I currently represent is a mammoth district, and it's so big geographically to cover. This map is basically doubling the size. And the other question I would have, was there any consideration given to the changed representation for the county? I'll take Kings County, for example, because there's only 2 complete districts inside of Kings County on this map, and there's really only 2 in West Prince. And when I look at number 17, that's another mammoth for somebody to have to cover as an MLA. And I don't know how the city districts work, but I know, and Sid could probably confirm there's a lot of MLA action required, I'll say, in some of these rural districts. We'd be the first point of contact for lots of things. It could be a school issue, it could be a health issue, it could be a seniors issue. Pretty well the first line of government defense is the MLA. And quite often we try to go to visit people in their area. So I guess my questions are kind of 2, maybe threefold. Was there any consideration given to the county, the fact that in Kings County we would lose a lot of representation that we currently have? The sheer size and volume, is there enough variance that those districts could be made smaller? Was there any consideration to any of those things?
To answer your first question about consideration for the county lines, no consideration was given to that, nor has that been a consideration for some time. Second, there is room for some deviation, and that was shown even in the previous map, and it's shown in sample 2 to a certain extent in this map. But it's certainly recognized, even the Supreme Court of Canada has recognized that rural districts cause greater challenges for MLAs than do urban ones usually. And so that's certainly something that we try to consider. And just to speak about your own riding, even on the 27 district, it's, as you say, quite a drive for us islanders anyway. And it'd be even greater one when it gets to be 18. But that's our job, is to draw 18 and not 27 this time.
Any further comments tonight? Way in the back.
It's Brian Ching from Surrey. My only comment is that listening to the rural people and the more urban people, the lady from Mermaid, let's say, it seems that everyone would probably be happier with a little larger variance that would allow, a larger variance would allow communities of interest to stay more together. Surrey is going to be in a big geographic district regardless, but I think under the Supreme Court you're allowed to go to 25% variance, but I think the higher the variance, I think the more communities of interest you'll have together, and I guess my only comment is if we could increase the variance some, I think we could keep communities of interest together more, and everyone would be happier, not just the rural people, but the urban people as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Anyone?
Well, if not, I want to thank you for your comments, presentations, and questions. They're helpful to the Commission, and I can assure you we'll try to consider all that was said here, and that will be said at the future meetings. And thank you again for coming. We really appreciate it. Good night.